Good morning. Let's talk about kitchens. From the start, I've had an idea for this chateau that the kitchen family room space is going to be over this end of the house. This is the right side next to the garage. And that the kitchen would be some kind of an open arrangement. There are a couple of practical constraints we need to keep in mind. The window facing the front has a low windowsill, 28 inches, and that's necessary in order to maintain the symmetry of the front. A 28-inch window means that we can't run a standard 36-inch counter across in front of it, so we don't have the option of putting the sink in front of the window. So that's going to control some of how we lay this kitchen out. Also, we've got this nice stretch of wall, long stretch of wall, it's about 17 feet, available to us. So that sort of cries out for stove, refrigerator, pantry, cabinets, things like that. Also, with the sink not under the window, typically people don't like to be staring at the wall when they're at the sink, so the sink probably not go against that garage wall. That's the wall facing the garage. Rather, it will go somewhere in this stretch of counter. So those are the general constraints. Some other practical points to keep in mind. People like to talk about how everybody gathers in the kitchen, and that is true. However, that's not something that people engaged in cooking particularly like. So I try to arrange these kitchens when I design these houses that there's no thoroughfare through the kitchen, no reason for anybody to go into the kitchen workspace other than to work in the kitchen. That's a general principle I think that's good to hold on to in the vast majority of cases. Also, put things in the central workspace that need to be there, and don't put things in there that don't need to be there. So I have this stretch of cabinets coming out to the end here, and I'm thinking that this end of the row of cabinets could be devoted to something like a spot to make a cup of coffee, or it could be wall ovens, things that are not part of the main activity of cooking and washing up. Okay, let's take a look now at what I've got started. So I have a file, like I showed with doors and windows in the previous video, I have a file that's just kitchens. And in it I have a whole bunch of appliances. I have cabinets of various types. I have corner cabinets, different kinds of sinks. I also have entire kitchens that I've done on other projects. If I'm happy with the kitchen and think I might be able to reuse it, I just drop it into this file here and come back to it. So we have here my first go at that kitchen, and that is just to run a bunch of stuff all along that garage wall. Now, I figured that a nice hood over the stove makes a nice focal point for a traditional sort of country kitchen. So that's my starting point in terms of design, is to put the focus around the stove area. So I started by laying out a simple cooktop, some cabinets to support it and space on either side to work, and a nice hood over it. And then I ran the refrigerator and wall ovens off to one side. And the result I found didn't quite work for me. This left section here is massive and kind of overpowers what I'd wanted to have as the focal point. So I rethought that a little bit, and we'll get into that in a moment. But before we do, I wanted to say one or two more things about some practical points to keep in mind. For a start, I think that it's critical for safety reasons to have at least a foot of counter space on each side of a stove. I never ever put a stove right up against a corner, for example, so that one side is blocked. This is because if you've got something on the back burner that you need to pull off the back burner in an emergency, you want to be able to reach it from the side and pull it to the side. You do not want to have to reach over the front burners. So always, please put at least a foot on each side of the stove. Ditto as far as the design of this hood. I did not bring these bracket things down to the countertop surface because they would block access to the back burners. They would block access to the back burners. I'll show you a couple of photographs. Here's one that I consider problematic. We have these two cabinets coming down to the countertop, and there's a little bit of space between the stove and the cabinet. But it doesn't look to me like enough space to reach in and pull something off to the side safely off the back burner. You can see they've got a few jars and things tucked in that corner there. So it's not a very large space. And if you've got constricted space anyway, please don't store stuff in there. You need to keep that open. This is also rather impractical from the point of view of just simply blocking access to the stove from countertops. I mean, if you're preparing things to put in a pot or a pan on the stove, you don't want to have to get around this obstruction here to get it from your counter onto the stove. Basically, this is problematic. I don't think this is a good solution, and I wouldn't recommend it. If you're going to bring something down to the countertop, if you really want to have that stuff come down all the way to the counter, then two things you can do. One, make it really nice and wide like this, so that you've got plenty of space on each side of the stove for safety reasons, and then step it back again so that you've got a better use of the countertop surface. Got one more picture here. This is a good example of that. It looks to me, it's a little hard to tell from the angle, but it looks to me like you could reach to the back burner and pull something off to the side safely. And this piece coming down doesn't interfere too much with the use of the counter. Now, I still prefer just having the bracket end at the wall and not come all the way down in large majority of circumstances. It just seems like a much more practical solution. So those are some practical points and safety points to keep in mind. Now, not being quite satisfied with this because of the mass of this stuff, I decided to see if I could find a way to break this into two parts and put them on either side of the stove. I also decided to eliminate the two ovens and go with a range and oven underneath the range. And that was partly just because I decided I needed to reduce the overall bulk if I didn't want this thing to look like it was looming in the room. Also, it's 2 feet wider than the space I have available on the floor plan. I wasn't concerned about that when I did this first layout. I just wanted to have this layout and see how it looked, and figured that if I know I can adapt it. So I'm in the process of doing the adapting right now. So I'm going to eliminate the wall ovens and just go with an oven under the range. That means that the pot drawers that I like to put under the range, when I have a cooktop, I like to put pot drawers right under it because I like to put storage near where things are being used. That's another basic principle of kitchen design. Store things near where you use them. Anything that you use regularly. If it's something you can use infrequently, then sure, you can store it somewhere else. But if you're cooking, you want to have your pots and pans close by. So I usually put pot drawers right underneath the cooktop. And then I put smaller drawers on either side in order to pack in more things. Well, since we no longer have since I'm going to go with different arrangement here, and I'm going to make a slight adjustment here, so I'll pause this. Okay, back. I did that so that I could make this all just a little easier to see. All right. We have a range with oven underneath and drawers, cabinets on either side with pot-sized drawers so that I still have my pot-sized drawers. I've gone from a 42-inch to a 36-inch refrigerator, and I've put a 24-inch pantry cabinet next to it. That's all on the right side. So we've got a 36-inch fridge and a 24-inch pantry cabinet. And on the left, I have this little arrangement, which could serve as a great little coffee corner place so that somebody doesn't have to go into the kitchen workspace to make a cup of coffee. Also, as an alternative, this central part of the cabinet here could be removed, and this could become a knee-hole space so that a person could use this as a little desk area. Oftentimes people like to do their monthly bills in the kitchen and a little dedicated space for that. So that's an alternative that could easily be adapted by anybody after the fact. So this arrangement here is still a little bit too wide for the space I have available. So the next thing I'm going to do is make a copy of this and make some adjustments to it. For example, the 36-inch cabinets on each side of the stove, I may reduce down to 30-inch cabinets. That'll gain me a foot of space. Okay, a quick look at progress here. I've made the changes to the array of cabinets against the garage wall. What I've done in order to make it fit, I needed to remove about 2 feet off the length. I had about 19, it was about 19 feet long, and I needed it to be about 17 feet. So I have taken the pantry cabinet and reduced it from a 24-inch wide cabinet to an 18-inch wide cabinet. An 18-inch wide cabinet is still very practical. You can still store a lot of stuff in it. And then I've taken 9 inches off the cabinets on each side of the stove. So instead of 36-inch cabinets, they're 27-inch cabinets. That adds up to a foot and a half. So between the 6 inches off the pantry and the foot and a half off of these two cabinets, I was able to leave this nice unit intact. I liked the way that had turned out. I had developed that for another project, and it was nicely working in with this scheme. So I was able to keep that kind of buffet piece intact, and I think it's a nice nice end. Now the door is squeezed slightly. I have 6 inches to the corner. The door is a 36-inch door from the garage to the kitchen, and I really could reduce that to 2'8", from 3 feet to 2'8", and I'm going to do that. I haven't done it yet, but I will be doing that so that the door and the cabinets don't have a conflict. I have a second door from the garage into the house, which leads through the mudroom, and that's a 3-foot wide door. So if there's a particularly large item that needs to be moved out of the garage and into the house, it can be taken through the other door. Meanwhile, a 2'8" door from the garage into the house is not impractical. Did a little suggestive tile design. That's the sort of thing that needs to be done in more detail with the actual tile, but this at least suggests a direction for the work. And then let's see, you can see where the peninsula counter is going to go. And the last thing I'll mention is the hood. Didn't carry it up to the ceiling because, in fact, with the hood against the garage wall, we've got a nice opportunity to use a hood that has a remote blower that keeps the noise of the fan out of the kitchen. So there would be a hood inside there, and then the actual blower would be inside the garage, up behind it, on this wall up here. And then we can vent it straight out of the roof of the garage, which is this roof deck up here. So in this corner, we'll work out an arrangement to vent the hood. And that keeps it from being vented out the wall in a location where it would disturb the front elevation. So something to keep in mind when you do have that, when you do put a hood in, you need to keep in mind how it's going to be vented to the outside. I do not recommend hoods that are not vented to the outside. I always use hoods that vent to the outside. One last little point here before we leave this. I wanted to point out that the refrigerator is a little deeper than the 2-foot cabinets. Now this is common. Most of the refrigerators available are deeper than cabinetry. This one's only about 2 inches deeper. Some of them are as much as 6 inches deeper. And you can get refrigerators that are shallow enough to fit within the 2-foot depth, but those refrigerators tend to be pretty tight inside. So in this case, I let it project out 2 inches from in front of the adjacent cabinet. And when I put this buffet in, although I originally used 24-inch cabinets for the buffet in the design I took this from originally, in this case, I've pulled it 2 inches away from the wall. Or actually, it might be 3. Let me check that. Yes, 3 inches away from the wall. So instead of a 24-inch deep cabinet, these are 27-inch deep. And these wall cabinets are set 15 inches deep instead of 12. I pulled it forward so that it matches the projection of the refrigerator part. And I've given it a base molding rather than a toe kick. So that helps it to read as a separate kind of freestanding entity from what's adjacent to it. Now I would have done the base molding on the refrigerator cabinet as well, but I believe that these refrigerators, typically you can't block the bottom with a base trim, because I think they use it for ventilating the motor. So that's something I'm not going to do. But this does help to give the impression of the buffet being a kind of a standalone piece of furniture. Now I'm going to make one more alteration to the buffet. I'm going to raise the top of it so that it matches the top of the refrigerator. I'm going to see if I can come up with a satisfactory design that allows me to do that, because I think it will be an improvement, make things a little more balanced. And we'll see that when we come back with the finished run of cabinets for the sink. So here we have the finished arrangement for the kitchen, all the cabinetry and appliances. I have not done all the finishes in the room, so these blank surfaces are not going to remain that way, but I'll get to that in the next video, which will be all about interior finishes. So how did it end up? Well, I adjusted the buffet cabinet here to align with the top of the refrigerator and added a little bit of tile in the back in there. I raised it 6 inches. That elongated these cabinets to what I think is probably the maximum in terms of how they look. Any more than that and they start to look too tall and skinny. And then I did the run of cabinetry related to the sink here. I'm going to take this up and we'll look at it from above. So on the sink side, we have a dishwasher at one end next to the sink, drawers for silverware, plates, and things like that. Things that are coming out of the dishwasher can go into these drawers. I have a cubby, a cabinet with a cubby that fits a microwave. There's room for a drawer under that, a few more small drawers, and then a prep sink at the end. I've extended the countertop to be 3 foot deep, which enables people to pull a stool up to the other end of it. It's not intended to be a full eating area. We've got a breakfast area right here and a dining area right there, so it seemed redundant to go further than that. I think keeping it simple is probably preferable on this occasion. Come back in here and line up our view again. Bit of an overhang on this end of the countertop and a little bracket there to support the end of it. I'm not entirely convinced I got this bracket where I want it to be. Might be a little bit too bulky, but I can fiddle with that later. Here we are inside the family room corner, looking towards the kitchen. And to the left here is the door that comes directly from the garage, and I did reduce the width of that door from 3 feet to 2 foot 8 inches in order to provide enough space to do this run of cabinets as I wanted. Anyway, that wraps up this video all about the kitchen. I think it came out pretty good. The next video I will do interior finishes throughout the house, including this room and the walls around the fireplace in the living room, and also the master bathroom for sure. So do come back. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks.